My boyfriend's mom called me an educated peasant in the bathroom after I defended public schools at their family dinner. When I finally opened up to him about what I heard, he laughed coldly and said, "You embarrassed my family." I stayed silent. That was 3 months ago. This morning, he was standing outside my apartment in tears. My boyfriend was born into third-generational wealth. Meanwhile, I grew up in Tent City on Skid Row. I still don't know who my parents are or what they look like, but with the help of a few right turns in life, I managed to work my way up at a door-to-door sales job and rent my first apartment. My boyfriend was actually the first one to approach me in my local Starbucks. He smelled like Tom Ford cologne, wore an expensive suit, gold watch, very put together. I honestly expected us not to get along because of how obviously different our backgrounds were, but we yapped for almost an hour straight, and he even made me laugh. Not the forced smile laugh, but a real wholesome one. After that, we went on more dates, and I slowly found myself falling in love. I tried to savor every moment we shared, because I assumed when I told him about my upbringing and my lack of formal education, he would instantly turn his nose, but he didn't. Wow, so you really worked your way up. You know that's really impressive. I didn't detect any hint of untruthfulness or entitlement in his voice. Instantly, my walls went down. I was ready to marry that man. From there, I started accepting his invites to his lavish parties and high society events. It was like a whole new world. Parents were genuinely stressing about whether they should pay for their kids to attend Yale or Harvard. Others were discussing the pros and cons of going to Santorini or the Canary Islands for summer. I knew that none of them would even be able to fathom the fact that I practically spent my entire childhood daydreaming about having enough food to eat, debating whether I should skip lunch or if I should skip dinner. Needless to say, I had no contribution to their discussions until the topic of politics came up. There was a very heated conversation going on at the other end of the table. Suddenly, the woman very loudly exclaimed, "Ugh, public schools shouldn't even exist. If you can't afford real education, then I don't see why you should even be allowed to be part of society." And instead of anyone calling her out on her BS, they started nodding their heads like it was the most reasonable opinion in the world, like it was something they had discussed hundreds of times before. I just bit my tongue. But then my boyfriend's mom said, "Right, like if you can't afford food, maybe that's nature's way of saying you shouldn't be here." I took a deep breath and said, "I mean, these are all great points, but don't you think some people just need extra help getting back on their feet?" The entire table went silent. I even heard a few audible gasps. My boyfriend looked wide-eyed and extremely shocked. I twirled my peas around my plate with my fork. "But I mean still, the poor should be kissing our feet and thanking us for all we do for them," I said, trying to save myself from being noticed as an outsider. Everyone immediately broke back into clamor about how much they hated anyone who wasn't them. I really thought it was a good save, until I excused myself to the bathroom and closed the stall door. That's when my boyfriend's mother and sister walked in. "Did you hear what William's girlfriend said?" "Ugh, don't get me started," his mom replied. "He had warned us that she was from the gutter, but I didn't know she was an educated peasant too. I hope he realizes that she's nothing but a poverty project soon and dumps her." I stopped listening after that. I still don't know if they knew I was in the stall, but I was humiliated. As soon as they left, I called for an Uber home. The last thing I wanted was to face his family again, but I didn't break up with my boyfriend. In fact, I never told William about what I'd heard, because he made me think that he loved me. So now I was going to make him think that I still loved him. From there, I showed up to every single event. I learned everything I could about networking and the ropes of high society. Soon I became the #1 seller of my door-to-door sales job and was on track to earning 6 figures a year. I was making the company so much money that they even planned an event just to honor me. Nothing as lavish as the ones my boyfriend attended, but still a pretty big deal. So I invited William and insisted that his entire family come. I also may have lied about it being a red carpet and black tie event. The feeling of me getting on stage was exhilarating, and made even better by the fact that whenever I looked over at my boyfriend and his family, they looked disgusted. They spent the entire evening fake smiling and whispering to each other. I was on the way home when I got the call. My boyfriend had broken up with me. His excuse? Things just weren't the same anymore. I laughed, and our conversation only lasted 2 minutes. I was satisfied that I had made the most of the situation, and was ready to leave it in the past. But apparently, William was not, because he never expected me to be completely fine with him leaving. And it wasn't long before he taught me exactly what secrets rich people are hiding. 3 days after our breakup, I started noticing strange things. First, my work email was flooded with spam, thousands of messages that crashed my inbox. Then my personal email too. I had to create new accounts for both. Next, my phone started getting calls from random numbers at all hours. When I'd answer, there would be silence or sometimes just breathing on the other end. I didn't immediately connect these annoyances to William. It wasn't until I got home one evening and found my apartment door slightly ajar that I started to worry. Nothing was missing, but things were moved around, just enough to notice. My toothbrush was on the wrong side of the sink. My books were rearranged on the shelf. The photo I kept of my favorite social worker from childhood was face down. I called my landlord first thing the next morning to ask if anyone had been given access to my apartment. He swore no one had requested entry. I changed my locks that day, paying out of pocket since the landlord insisted there hadn't been a break-in. That weekend, I was grocery shopping when I ran into Rebecca, one of William's cousins. She'd always been a little nicer than the rest of his family, occasionally making actual conversation with me at events. She looked surprised to see me. "Oh, hi there," she said, clearly uncomfortable. "I heard about you and William. I'm sorry it didn't work out." I shrugged. "These things happen." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Look, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but William's been saying some things about you. Weird things." My stomach dropped. "What kind of things?" "He's telling everyone you're unstable, that you've been harassing him since the breakup, that you're obsessed with his family's money and threatened to make up stories about them if he left you." She looked around nervously. "He showed people texts from you that were pretty disturbing." "What texts?" "I haven't texted him at all since we broke up." Rebecca looked confused. "Really?" "He showed everyone these long, rambling messages, threatening to expose family secrets or something." I pulled out my phone and showed her my text history with William. The last message was from him, saying, "Take care of yourself," after our breakup call. Nothing from me. "That's strange," Rebecca said. "The texts he showed us came from your number." I felt sick. Someone was sending texts pretending to be me. And the family secrets thing. I didn't even know any family secrets. What was William playing at? I thanked Rebecca for the warning and finished my shopping in a daze. When I got home, I checked all my social media accounts. Everything seemed normal until I looked at my Facebook page from a friend's account. There were posts I hadn't made, weird, rambling statuses about wealth inequality and eating the rich, posts tagging William's family members with vague accusations. I immediately changed all my passwords and set up two-factor authentication. I deleted the fake posts and locked down my privacy settings. Then I called my cell provider to see if anyone could be spoofing my number. They weren't very helpful, but suggested I change my number as a precaution. The next day at work, my boss called me into his office. He looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with a pen on his desk. "We've received some concerning information," he started. "A complaint about your conduct outside of work hours." I felt my heart rate spike. "What complaint?" He slid a printout across the desk. It was an email from an anonymous source claiming I was using company resources to stalk a former boyfriend and his family, that I was mentally unstable and potentially dangerous. There were screenshots of those fake Facebook posts attached. "This isn't true," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Someone is trying to sabotage me. I can prove those posts weren't from me." My boss looked relieved. "I didn't think it sounded like you, but we had to take it seriously." I spent my lunch break documenting everything that had happened since the breakup. The spam emails, the strange calls, the apartment intrusion, the fake social media posts. I wasn't sure what William was trying to accomplish, but it was starting to affect my life in real ways. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it. "Hello? You should have just walked away." It was William's voice, cold and unfamiliar. "What are you talking about? You embarrassed my family, made us look foolish in front of your colleagues." He said the word like he was talking about cockroaches. "Now you're spreading lies about us." "I haven't said anything about your family to anyone," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "But someone's pretending to be me online and sending fake texts from my number." He laughed, a short, humorless sound. "You really think anyone will believe that? My family has a reputation to protect. We take care of problems before they become public. Are you threatening me? I'm giving you a friendly warning. Stop whatever game you're playing or things will get worse for you." He hung up before I could respond. I immediately recorded everything I could remember about the conversation in my notes app. Then I called Joshua, a guy from work who used to be a tech support specialist. I explained the situation without mentioning William's name, just saying an ex was harassing me. "Sounds like you've got a stalker situation," Joshua said. "You need to document everything, and you might want to consider getting a cheap security camera for your apartment." I took his advice and ordered a basic camera system that connected to my phone. It wasn't fancy, but it would at least tell me if someone was entering my apartment when I wasn't there. The next morning, I woke up to find my car had been keyed overnight. Long, deep scratches ran down both sides. The word liar was carved into the hood. I took pictures and filed a police report, but without witnesses or security footage, there wasn't much they could do. I was starting to feel like I was in some kind of psychological thriller. William had seemed so normal, so kind during our relationship. How had I missed this side of him? Or had the breakup triggered something? Either way, I needed to protect myself. I started varying my routines, taking different routes to work, shopping at different stores, even changing up the times I'd leave my apartment. I kept detailed records of every strange occurrence. I set up the security cameras in my apartment and checked the footage obsessively. A week went by with no new incidents. I started to relax a little, thinking maybe William had moved on. Then I got a call from my landlord. "I've received a complaint about you," he said, from several other tenants. "They're saying you're having loud arguments in the middle of the night, that you're threatening someone." "That's not true," I said. "I live alone. I'm not having arguments with anyone." "Well, I've got 3 separate complaints. They're saying they can hear you screaming at someone about money and family secrets." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Can you tell me which neighbors complained?" He named 3 apartments, none of which were adjacent to mine. In fact, they were all on different floors. There's no way they could have heard anything from my apartment, even if I had been screaming. "I think someone is trying to cause problems for me," I told him. "I've been having issues with an ex-boyfriend. He might be behind these fake complaints." My landlord sounded skeptical, but agreed to hold off on any action for now. I thanked him and immediately checked my security camera footage. Nothing unusual in my apartment, but this was escalating. William was trying to get me evicted. I needed help. I called Donna, the social worker who had helped me the most when I was younger. She'd kept in touch over the years, checking in occasionally to see how I was doing. I explained the situation, and she listened without judgment. "This sounds like a classic case of stalking and harassment," she said. "Have you considered getting a restraining order?" I hadn't, mostly because I wasn't sure if I had enough evidence. But Donna encouraged me to at least consult with a lawyer. She recommended a legal aid clinic that offered free consultations. The next day, I met with a lawyer named Kimberly at the clinic. She reviewed all my documentation and frowned. "You've got a pattern of harassment here, but it's sophisticated. The spoofed texts, the fake social media posts, those are hard to prove weren't actually you. And the apartment intrusion without anything stolen makes it difficult to file charges. So there's nothing I can do?" I felt defeated. "I didn't say that," Kimberly replied. "We can still file for a restraining order, and I think you should consider setting up some kind of trap to catch him in the act." She explained that if I could get evidence of William or someone working for him actively harassing me, we'd have a much stronger case. She suggested setting up additional cameras outside my apartment and possibly having a friend stay with me to witness any strange occurrences. I didn't have many friends close enough to ask for this kind of help, but I did have coworkers who respected me. I approached Thomas, explaining that I was having trouble with an ex who was harassing me. I asked if he'd be willing to help me document any strange incidents. He agreed without hesitation. That weekend, Thomas came over with his laptop and helped me set up an additional security camera facing my parking spot. We also installed a simple alarm system on my doors and windows. Nothing fancy, just something that would make noise if they were opened. While we were working, Thomas asked about my ex. I was vague at first, not wanting to drag William's name through the mud, but Thomas was persistent. "This guy sounds dangerous," he said. "What's his deal? Rich kid who can't handle rejection?" I hesitated, then decided to be honest. "Something like that. His family is wealthy, old money. They didn't approve of me because of my background." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "What background?" I realized I'd never told anyone at work about my childhood. I grew up homeless, in Tent City on Skid Row. Thomas's eyes widened. Seriously? And now you're our top seller. That's incredible. His reaction reminded me of William's initial response. Genuine admiration without pity. It made me wonder if I'd been too quick to lump all wealthy people together based on William's family's behavior. Our conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. I tensed up, but when I checked through the peephole, it was just my neighbor Kelly asking to borrow some sugar. I relaxed and opened the door. Sorry to bother you, Kelly said, then noticed Thomas. Oh, I didn't realize you had company. It's fine, I assured her. This is my coworker Thomas. We're just setting up some security cameras. Kelly looked concerned. Is everything okay? I hesitated, then decided it might be good to have another neighbor aware of the situation. I'm having some trouble with an ex. Nothing dangerous, just annoying. Kelly nodded sympathetically. Let me know if you need anything. I'm usually home in the evenings. After she left, Thomas and I finished setting up the cameras. He showed me how to access the feeds from my phone and set up motion alerts. It wasn't a professional security system, but it was better than nothing. That night, I slept better knowing I had some protection in place. The next morning, I checked all the camera feeds. Nothing unusual. I went to work feeling more confident. The calm lasted 3 days. Then I got a call from my bank asking about unusual activity on my account. Someone had attempted to withdraw a large sum using my online banking credentials. The attempt had been flagged as suspicious because it was for exactly $10,000, just under the amount that would trigger automatic reporting to federal authorities. I immediately froze my accounts and changed all my banking passwords. The bank representative assured me no money had been taken, but they would need to issue me new cards as a precaution. When I got home that evening, I checked my mail and found a letter from a credit card company thanking me for my application. I hadn't applied for any new credit cards. I called the company immediately and discovered that someone had applied for a high-limit card in my name. They had my social security number, address, and enough personal information to pass the initial verification. I spent the next few hours placing fraud alerts on my credit reports and freezing my credit with all 3 major bureaus. I was exhausted and stressed, constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every noise. The next day at work, I got called into my boss's office again. This time, he looked genuinely concerned. We've received a report that you're stealing client information, he said without preamble. Someone sent an anonymous tip with screenshots of client data on your personal email. My stomach dropped. That's not possible. I've never sent client data to my personal email. He showed me the screenshots. They looked convincing. Emails from my work account to my personal Gmail with attachments containing client lists and sales figures. But I knew I hadn't sent them. Someone is framing me, I said. They've been harassing me for weeks. They've tried to access my bank accounts, applied for credit cards in my name, and now they're trying to get me fired. My boss looked uncertain. These screenshots look real. Can your IT department check when these emails were sent? And from what IP address? I bet they weren't sent from my computer. He agreed to have IT investigate. In the meantime, I was placed on paid leave pending the results. I felt sick as I packed up my things and left the office. My job was the one thing I had built entirely on my own. If I lost it because of William's vendetta, I wasn't sure what I'd do. I drove home in a daze, barely noticing the black SUV that seemed to be following me until it pulled up alongside me at a red light. The window rolled down, revealing William's sister. You should have just disappeared after he dumped you, she said, her voice dripping with contempt. Now you're forcing us to take action. Before I could respond, the light turned green and she sped away. I was shaking so badly I had to pull over. I took out my phone and recorded everything she'd said while it was still fresh in my memory. Then I called Kimberly, the lawyer. They're escalating, I told her, trying to steal my identity, get me fired, and now making direct threats. Kimberly was quiet for a moment. This goes beyond typical harassment. They're trying to destroy your life. We need to file for that restraining order immediately, and you should consider filing a police report for the identity theft attempts. I agreed to meet her at the legal aid clinic the next morning. When I got home, I checked my security cameras. Everything seemed normal. I double-checked all my locks and tried to get some sleep, but I kept waking up at every little noise. The next morning, I headed to the legal aid clinic. Kimberly helped me fill out the paperwork for a temporary restraining order against William. We included all the documentation I'd gathered: the keyed car, the fake social media posts, the attempted identity theft, and the direct threats from both William and his sister. The judge should grant the temporary order based on this evidence, Kimberly explained. Then there will be a hearing in about 2 weeks where both parties can present their case for a permanent order. I felt a small sense of relief. At least I was taking action. After leaving the clinic, I went to the police station to file a report about the identity theft attempts. The officer took my statement but didn't seem particularly concerned. Identity theft was common, and without clear evidence linking it to William, there wasn't much they could do beyond taking a report. When I checked my phone after leaving the station, I had 3 missed calls from my boss. I called him back immediately. IT checked those emails, he said. They weren't sent from your computer or your usual IP address. They came from somewhere outside our network. I felt a wave of relief. So you know I didn't send them? It looks that way. But here's the strange part. Whoever sent them had access to your work email password. We're resetting all your credentials and investigating how this could have happened. I thanked him and hung up. At least I wasn't going to lose my job. But how had William or someone working for him gotten my work password? I was always careful about security. When I got home, I checked my security cameras again. Nothing unusual outside. But when I reviewed the footage from inside my apartment, I noticed something strange. At around 2 a.m., there was a brief moment where all the cameras went offline simultaneously for about 5 minutes. When they came back on, everything looked normal. I called Joshua, my tech-savvy coworker, and described what I'd seen. Sounds like someone might have used a signal jammer, he said. They're illegal for civilians to use but not impossible to get. It would temporarily disrupt Wi-Fi, cell signals, and wireless cameras within a limited range. So someone could have been in my apartment during those 5 minutes? It's possible. They'd need to be fairly close to your apartment to use a jammer effectively, and they'd have to know exactly what they were doing to get in and out so quickly without leaving traces. Either possibility was terrifying. I thanked Joshua and hung up, then did a thorough check of my apartment. Nothing seemed out of place at first glance, but upon closer inspection, I noticed small things. A drawer slightly ajar, my laptop in a slightly different position than I'd left it. I felt violated, knowing someone had been in my personal space while I was away. I decided I couldn't stay there that night. I packed an overnight bag and called Kelly, my neighbor who had offered help. She agreed to let me crash on her couch without asking too many questions. The next morning, I got a call from the courthouse. My temporary restraining order had been granted. William would be served with papers that day, ordering him to stay at least 100 yards away from me, my home, and my workplace. He was also prohibited from contacting me directly or through third parties. I felt a small victory, but I knew a piece of paper wouldn't necessarily stop him if he was determined to continue harassing me. Still, it was something. Legal recognition that what was happening to me was wrong and needed to stop. I returned to my apartment to get ready for work, checking all my security cameras first to make sure everything looked normal. As I was getting dressed, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A restraining order? Really? You have no idea who you're dealing with. I took a screenshot and forwarded it to Kimberly. This was a direct violation of the restraining order, and we needed to document it. At work, things were tense. Word had gotten around about my temporary leave and the investigation. Some coworkers were supportive, but others seemed wary, like they weren't sure what to believe. I tried to focus on my job, but it was hard to concentrate knowing that William was escalating his harassment. During my lunch break, I got a call from Kimberly. The hearing for the permanent restraining order is set for next Friday, she told me. But I'm concerned about this text you received. It shows he has no intention of respecting the temporary order. What can we do about it? Document everything. Any violation of the restraining order strengthens our case for the permanent one, and it could potentially lead to criminal charges if he continues. I thanked her and hung up. As I was walking back to my desk, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from William's mother, sent to both my personal and work emails, as well as CC'd to several of my coworkers and my boss. The subject line read, "The truth about your star employee." The email itself was a long, detailed account of my background, not just my homelessness, but embellished with claims that I'd been involved in substances and prostitution, that I'd manipulated William, trying to extort money from his family, that I was mentally unstable and dangerous. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My coworkers were already opening the email, their expressions changing as they read it. Some looked at me with confusion, others with disgust. My boss called me into his office immediately. He looked uncomfortable as he showed me the email on his screen. "I assume none of this is true?" he asked. "The part about me growing up homeless is true," I admitted. "The rest is completely fabricated. This woman is the mother of my ex-boyfriend. His family is harassing me because I broke up with him." My boss raised an eyebrow. "You broke up with him?" "Because he's telling people you became obsessed after he ended things." I pulled out my phone and showed him the text history with William, including his breakup message. He ended it, but I was fine with that. I've been documenting their harassment campaign against me. I just got a temporary restraining order against him yesterday. My boss seemed to believe me, but the damage was already done. The email had gone to everyone in the office. My personal history, though distorted, was now public knowledge. The thing I'd been most private about, my childhood homelessness, was being used as a weapon against me. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, aware of the whispers and stares from my coworkers. A few, like Thomas, made a point of checking on me and offering support, but most kept their distance, unsure what to believe. When I got home that evening, I found a large envelope taped to my door. Inside was a stack of printed photos, pictures of me going about my daily routine, me getting coffee, me shopping for groceries, me talking to Kimberly outside the legal aid clinic. The last photo showed me sleeping in my own bed, clearly taken from inside my apartment during the night. Attached was a handwritten note. "A restraining order is just a piece of paper. We can get to you whenever we want." I grabbed the photos and note with shaking hands and immediately called the police. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was a serious threat. The officer who showed up actually took it seriously this time. He looked through the photos, especially the one of me sleeping, and his expression darkened. "This is stalking and breaking and entering at minimum," he said. "We'll need to dust for fingerprints and check for any evidence they left behind." While the police did their thing, I called Kimberly and sent her photos of everything. She was alarmed and told me to pack a bag and stay somewhere else tonight. I called Kelly again, but this time she seemed hesitant. "I actually got a weird email about you today," she admitted, "from someone claiming to be your ex's mother. It said you were dangerous and unstable." My heart sank. They sent that to everyone I know. None of it's true. They're trying to isolate me. Kelly was quiet for a moment. "You can still stay here tonight, but maybe we should talk about finding you somewhere else after that." I thanked her, trying not to cry. William's family was systematically destroying every part of my life. My job, my reputation, my home, and now my few friendships. I packed enough clothes for a few days and waited for the police to finish. The officer gave me his card before leaving. "We'll increase patrols in your area, but honestly, you should consider staying elsewhere until we can make an arrest." That night at Kelly's, I barely slept. Every noise made me jump. I kept checking my phone for alerts from my security cameras. Around 3 a.m., I got a notification. Motion detected in my apartment. I opened the app with trembling fingers. The footage showed a figure in dark clothing moving through my living room with a flashlight. They were wearing gloves and a mask, methodically going through my drawers and cabinets. I immediately called 911 and reported a break-in at my apartment. I woke Kelly to tell her what was happening. She let me watch the live feed on her TV. The intruder was still there, now in my bedroom, pulling clothes from my closet and dumping them on the floor. They were trashing my place. Suddenly, the feed cut out, all cameras offline. I frantically refreshed the app, but nothing. 5 minutes later, they came back online. My apartment was a disaster. Furniture overturned, clothes everywhere, even my mattress slashed open. On the wall, written in what looked like red paint, "Leave town or else." The police arrived too late to catch anyone. They took more photos and dusted for prints again, but the intruder had been careful. The officer called me to report they'd found no usable evidence despite the extensive damage and threatening message. "Is there anyone who can help you?" he asked. "Family or friends in another city maybe?" I didn't have family, and my friends were limited to coworkers and neighbors, all of whom had received that email painting me as unstable and dangerous. I felt completely alone. The next morning, I went to work despite everything. I needed normalcy, and I couldn't let William's family win by hiding. My boss called me into his office first thing. "I've been getting calls from clients," he said, looking uncomfortable. "Someone's been contacting them directly, telling them you've been fired for stealing client information and that they should take their business elsewhere." I felt sick. "I haven't contacted any clients." "I know, but the damage is being done. We've lost 3 accounts already." He sighed heavily. "I don't want to do this, but I need to put you on paid leave until the situation resolves, for the company's sake." I understood his position, but it still felt like another victory for William. I cleared out my desk while avoiding eye contact with my coworkers. Thomas stopped me on my way out. "This is bullshit," he said. "Everyone knows you're being set up." I appreciated his support, but everyone clearly didn't include the clients who were pulling their business or my boss who just suspended me. I thanked Thomas and headed to my car. As I was driving home, I noticed a black SUV following me, the same one William's sister had been in. I took a detour, driving to the police station instead of my apartment. The SUV didn't follow me into the parking lot. I reported the stalking to the same officer who'd taken my previous reports. He seemed genuinely concerned now. "This is escalating quickly," he said. "Have you considered leaving town for a while, just until we can build a case?" I had nowhere to go and limited funds. My job was on hold, my apartment wasn't safe, and my reputation was in tatters. William's family was winning. I checked into a cheap motel using cash, not wanting to leave an electronic trail. I spent the night researching my options. The hearing for the permanent restraining order was still a week away. I needed to survive until then, and gather enough evidence to convince the judge. The next morning, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered it. "Is this about the job posting?" a woman asked. I was confused. "What job posting?" "The nanny position. Your ad said you needed someone to start immediately. I have references." I felt a chill. "I didn't post any job ads. Can you tell me where you saw this?" She directed me to a Craigslist posting. Someone had created an ad in my name, using my phone number, claiming I was looking for a live-in nanny for my 3 young children. The ad included my address and suggested applicants just stop by anytime, if they couldn't reach me by phone. I immediately contacted Craigslist to have the ad removed, but the damage was done. My phone kept ringing with calls from potential nannies. Some became angry when I explained there was no job, accusing me of wasting their time. Later that day, I got a text from Kelly. "There are people showing up at your apartment looking for some nanny job. The building manager is freaking out." I explained the situation and asked if she'd seen anything else suspicious. She told me several delivery drivers had also shown up with food orders I hadn't placed, all requiring cash payment. They were trying to create chaos around my apartment, making me look unstable to my neighbors and building management. I called Kimberly again, updating her on the latest harassment. "This is good for our case," she said. "It shows a clear pattern of escalating behavior, but I'm worried about your safety. Is there anywhere else you can stay until the hearing?" I thought about it and realized there was one person who might help. Donna, my old social worker. I hadn't wanted to drag her into this, but I was running out of options. Donna answered on the second ring. When I explained my situation, she didn't hesitate. "Come stay with me," she said. "My spare room isn't much, but it's safe." I thanked her through tears and arranged to meet at a public place rather than going directly to her home, just in case I was being followed. Donna lived in a modest house in a quiet neighborhood. Her spare room was small but comfortable, with a twin bed and a desk. It felt safer than anywhere I'd been in weeks. "You need to go on the offensive," Donna said over tea that evening. "They're trying to isolate you and make you look crazy. You need to flip the script." "How do I do that?" I asked. "Document everything, like you've been doing, but also start telling your story publicly. Make it harder for them to paint you as the villain." The idea terrified me. I'd spent my entire life trying to hide my background, to blend in and appear normal. Going public meant exposing my most vulnerable self. But Donna was right. Hiding and reacting defensively wasn't working. I needed to take control of the narrative. The next day, I created a private blog documenting everything that had happened since the breakup. I included photos of the damage to my apartment and car, screenshots of the fake social media posts, the Craigslist ad, and the threatening note with the photos. I wrote about my relationship with William, his family's reaction to my background, and their systematic campaign to destroy my life after the breakup. I didn't publish it yet. It was my insurance policy, my way of making sure my side of the story would be heard if anything happened to me. With Donna's help, I also created a timeline of all the harassment incidents, organizing my evidence for the restraining order hearing. We worked on it for hours, making sure everything was clear and well documented. 2 days before the hearing, I got a call from Thomas. "You need to come to the office," he said, his voice urgent. "There's something you should see." I was hesitant to go back after being put on leave, but Thomas insisted it was important. When I arrived, he led me to the IT department where a guy named Timothy was waiting. "I've been looking into how someone accessed your work email," Timothy explained. "They used a program to crack your password, but they made a mistake. They tested their access from an IP address that wasn't masked." He showed me the logs on his screen. "This IP address accessed your account multiple times before the fake emails were sent. I traced it to a home internet account registered to William's father." I felt a surge of hope. "Can you document this for me?" "It's evidence for my restraining order hearing." Timothy nodded. "Already done. And there's more. The company's getting ready to sue whoever's behind this. Those lost client accounts are costing us money." I left the office with printed copies of Timothy's findings and a statement from the IT department confirming I hadn't sent the emails. It was the first solid evidence directly linking William's family to the harassment. The day of the hearing arrived. I dressed in my most professional outfit and met Kimberly outside the courthouse. William was there with his parents and a lawyer who looked like he charged more per hour than I made in a week. The hearing was tense. William's lawyer painted me as an unstable gold digger who couldn't accept being dumped. He showed the judge the fake texts and social media posts, claiming they proved my obsession with William's family. When it was our turn, Kimberly methodically presented our evidence. The IT department's report proving William's father had accessed my work email. The police reports about the break-ins. The photos of me sleeping in my own bed, clearly taken without my knowledge or consent. The timeline of escalating harassment. William's family looked increasingly uncomfortable as Kimberly laid out the evidence. Their lawyer tried to object several times, but the judge overruled him. The turning point came when Kimberly called Thomas as a witness. He testified about the work events, confirming that William had broken up with me immediately after I'd been honored at my company. He described how I'd remained professional and hadn't discussed William or his family with co-workers until the harassment began. The judge listened carefully to both sides. When the presentations were finished, she looked directly at William. Based on the evidence presented, I'm granting a permanent restraining order against the respondent. Mr. William is ordered to stay at least 500 yards away from the petitioner, her home, and her workplace for a period of 3 years. She turned to William's parents. While this order only applies to your son, I strongly suggest you all cease contact with the petitioner immediately. The evidence suggests a coordinated campaign of harassment that could result in criminal charges if it continues. William's mother started to protest, but their lawyer quickly silenced her. They left the courtroom without looking at me. Outside, Kimberly hugged me. This is a big win. The judge clearly saw through their tactics. I felt relieved, but still wary. Do you think they'll actually stop? The restraining order has teeth. Violations can mean jail time. And now that your company knows who was behind the fake emails, they might pursue their own legal action. The family has a lot to lose by continuing to harass you. I thanked Kimberly for everything and headed back to Donna's house. The next day, I met with my boss, showing him the court documents and the judge's findings. He seemed genuinely apologetic. We'd like you to come back to work, he said. And we're pursuing legal action against William's family for the damage to our client relationships. I returned to work the following Monday. Some coworkers were still awkward around me, but most were supportive, especially after the company-wide email my boss sent explaining the situation and confirming that I'd been the victim of a harassment campaign. Over the next few weeks, things slowly returned to normal. No more strange calls or emails. No more people showing up at my apartment. I found a new place to live, a small house for rent in a different neighborhood. I didn't tell anyone my new address except for Donna, Thomas, and my boss. 3 months after the hearing, I got an unexpected email from Rebecca, William's cousin. She apologized for her family's behavior and told me William had been sent to Europe to manage some family investments, basically exiled until the scandal blew over. His parents are terrified of a lawsuit from your company, she wrote. They've realized they picked the wrong person to mess with. I smiled at that. The homeless girl from Skid Row had stood up to a wealthy family and won, not because I had money or connections, but because I documented everything and refused to be intimidated. I never heard from William or his family again. My company not only took me back but promoted me 6 months later. I used my increased salary to start taking night classes at the local community college. Sometimes I think about that dinner where I overheard William's mother and sister in the bathroom. If I hadn't been in that stall, I might never have known what they really thought of me. I might have continued dating William, maybe even married into that toxic family. Instead, I learned an important lesson about who I am and what I'm capable of. The girl from Tent City didn't just survive, she thrived, despite everything they threw at her. And that's something no one can ever take away from me.